well known to the Israelis, well known to the Israelis. Why do they keep taking them, targeting them, killing them, imprisoning them with impunity? Why is that not outrageous to you?
What is your assessment of this report? Because this includes like serious allegations like use of white phosphorus in Lebanon and Gaza, and attacking ambulances, hospitals, and blocking the U.S. humanitarian aid.
Everybody believes that a civilized country like the United States of America, who's basically the umbilical cord for Israel to do everything under the sun, can stand and say, this should not go on. This should not go on. Not just, we urge them not to harm them and so on. Because this is obviously systematic.
Daphne, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Netanyahu has said that he will soon approve a plan for the evacuation of Palestinian civilians from fighting areas after having greenlit the military's operational plans for Rafah. Has the U.S. seen any of these plans yet?
I've not seen. I don't have any plan to read out or to offer an assessment on. But let me be very clear, and this has come up a couple of times this week. There should be no full-scale military operation in Rafah without a credible and executable plan to protect the civilian population. Part of that also, and this has been a something that the Secretary has made clear and reiterated in some remarks he gave in Tokyo last year, that we do not support the forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza to outside of Gaza. That's not something that we would support or condone.
Sorry, just not looking for any assessment, but have you actually received these plans?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of that.
And I have a few more on Heidi, but if you have...
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will the Secretary be in the conversations next week with administration officials, with the Israelis who are coming here to discuss Rafah?
I don't have I don't have specific scheduling to offer on like when those conversations will take place. Two, I don't have an exact delegation makeup both from the United States side or the Israeli side. But what I can say is that I have no doubt the State Department will be deeply engaged in those conversations. I do not believe that they will be happening at the Secretary's level, but of course we are deeply engaged on this issue from across the department.
And then just on Rafah generally, you guys have repeatedly talked about the importance of protecting the civilian population there. And, given the outreach to Israel to discuss this plan in more detail, is the administration in a position where you guys would be willing to provide resources to Israel to actually protect the civilian population if they're going to go ahead with this operation, or is the onus on Israel to do that with their own resources?
I don't want to get ahead of these conversations, Kylie. As you know, over the course of since October 7th, but even prior to that, we have a long-standing relationship with Israel in terms of provisions of security assistance and things like that. What we hope to happen through this conversation is for there to be a clear and direct engagement on how they are thinking about this and offer some insight into advice on how we would approach this situation were we in that position. And so I don't want to get ahead of that conversation. And if in the course of that it is determined that our Israeli partners need X, Y, and Z, that is, of course, a conversation that we'll continue to have. Yeah. Can I keep getting, then I'll go to you. Go ahead, Camilla. Still on Gaza, I assume? No? Okay, then go ahead, Saeed.
First, I want to ask about a colleague of mine in Gaza. He's, in fact, the bureau chief for Gaza for our newspaper and the editor-in-chief for the electronic version. His name is Mahmoud Abu Awad, Abu Mus'ab. I'll send you his name and his picture. He was taken by the Israelis on Sunday to Monday morning, and we lost his whereabouts. We don't know anything about him. Then there was a picture published with him stripped naked along with other men and so on. So my point is, when will the United States demand and say that this cannot keep on going with journalists that are credentialed, that have worked there for year after year, decade after decade, well known to the Israelis, Why do they keep taking them, targeting them, killing them, imprisoning them with impunity? Why is that not outrageous to you?
Said, when we talk about continuing to press Israel to enhance its mechanisms to better protect civilians, we of course are also talking about extending that to journalists as well. We are always concerned for the safety of journalists, especially in conflict zones, especially in somewhere like Gaza, where journalism plays a critical role. And as Secretary Blinken has said, journalists, including many Palestinians in Gaza, are doing extraordinary work under the most dangerous conditions, and we've been unequivocal here. We also have been clear and reiterated the fact that Israel needs to abide by international humanitarian law, especially as it conducts these operations, and that's something we'll continue to reiterate with them.
Well, honestly, with that, this slap on the wrist kind of language is not going in any way, shape, or form to sway the Israelis or to pressure them or to make them do stuff. You should, everybody believes that a civilized country like the United States of America, who's basically the umbilical cord for Israel to do everything under the sun, can stand and say, this should not go on. This should not go on. Not just, we urge them not to harm them and so on. Because this is obviously systematic. I mean, when 150, I don't know how many, 150 journalists are killed and imprisoned and taken and so on, this is not just,
It
something that
doesn't
happened.
sound like you have a follow-up question. So let me just jump in and say, from the president on down, we have reiterated that Israel it has a moral and strategic imperative to do more and to do everything it can to work on and bolster its deconfliction mechanisms, to take additional steps to protect civilians and minimize civilian casualties. And that, of course, includes and extends to journalists who we believe are doing important and vital work in the region.
A couple of things on Rafah. It has been assessed that it is impossible to evacuate Gazans from Rafah. There's about 1.4 million and so on. And it seems that, the United States is having meetings next week, or the administration will be having meetings.
The region.
A couple of things on Rafah. It has been assessed that it is impossible to evacuate Gazans from Rafah. There's about 1.4 million and so on. And it seems that, the United States is having meetings next week, or the administration will be having meetings with Ron Dermer and Hanigbi to discuss Rafah. So if you are convinced, and that's what we get, at least, the suggestion is that it is really very difficult, it's impossible. Why cannot this be made, like the statement or the standard U.S. position? The standard U.S. position that Rafah should not be invaded.
Said, it is our position that such an operation should not and cannot be conducted without a credible and serious plan, a plan that needs to account for and address the varying humanitarian factors in the Rafah region. Firstly, the more than 1 million people seeking refuge in the area. Two, it continuing to be an area that is a conduit for humanitarian aid. It is out of serious concern for these two factors that we have not been unambiguous about our concerns as it relates to an operation in Rafah, and we'll continue to have these conversations with our Israeli partners. Anything else?
After weeks, my last one. After weeks of this Rafah dilemma has been going on, is there a conceivable way to remove such a huge amount of people and move them safely, in your view or anybody's view?
When we're talking about dealing with the more than 1 million people who are seeking refuge in Rafah side, we're certainly not being prescriptive about how to go about and do that. And when it comes to the movement of the Palestinian people, especially those residing in Gaza, we've been very clear that the forcible movement or the forcible removal of them is certainly not something that we would support. But beyond that, I don't have we're not aiming to be prescriptive here, Said. We're going to continue to have these conversations with our Israeli partners on what we believe can hopefully be a path forward that will help defeat Hamas, but also be mindful of these varying humanitarian factors. On Gaza, go ahead.
Thank you. So you said that you expect Israel to act in line with international law. And last month, you announced publicly that you are assessing whether or not Israel is complying with the international law, and you're also assessing the use of U.S. weapons in Israel's war. Have you come to any conclusion, and do you have any expectation of that? You know how long it might take?
I don't have any
for this
updates.
investigation?
I don't have any updates to offer in that space. When we talk about that ongoing work, we're talking about it in the context of how this kind of work is ongoing in all conflict areas, where we're assessing the circumstances and anecdotes on the ground, and we're assessing what is happening. And of course, there are a number of vectors and a number of lines of efforts within the State Department to assess those kinds of things. We've talked about a couple of them from up here, processes like the Leahy process, the processes like CHURG, and some of that work is just going to continue, and I don't have an update to offer on that.
One more on that. Yesterday, Human Rights Watch and Oxfam said that they submitted a memorandum to the U.S. government regarding Israel's violations of international law, and this includes, you know, the misuse of U.S. weapons and blocking the U.S.-funded humanitarian aid. Have you viewed? What is your assessment of this report? Because this includes like serious allegations like use of white phosphorus in Lebanon and Gaza, and attacking ambulances, hospitals, and blocking the U.S. humanitarian aid. Do you have any response?
I've seen the open source reporting of it as it relates to the report. I don't have any specific assessment to offer on that, specifically as it relates to the National Security Memorandum and its linkage to that report. And just speaking to Sean's question, the implementation of the NSM is ongoing, and so I don't have anything else to offer on that.